Hello, everyone. It's Sam here. This is the second lecture in the Wiccan Theology Basics course. Um, Today's lecture begins with talking about goddesses and gods, femininities and masculinities, and the ideas of polarity and non-polar styles. I'll deal with feminist ritual in particular towards the end of the lecture. So, to start with, there's several strains of belief in the Wiccan movement about the nature of the divine, and let me just briefly run through them. Inclusive monotheism, in which the underlying unity of the divine is refracted through numerous expressions in the world and in our lives. Duotheism, in which there exist two great forces of femininity and masculinity whose dance of energy exchange shapes reality, and polytheism. Some Wiccans believe, along with Diane Fortune, that all goddesses are one goddess, all gods are one god, and the two are one in love. In this vein, we often hear people speak of the goddess and the god as standing in for the female principle and the male principle, like Shri and Vishnu, creativity and its realization, energy and matter. But these generic forces cannot have enough distinct personality to develop a relationship with. Just as my friends have names, and I have loved and lived with individual women, not all women, so my relationships to the divine are also personal. I, I believe that the goddesses and gods share qualities of divine power, the purity of focus and intention, the unchanging quality of eternity, and perhaps also gender with each other, but that they're otherwise distinct beings who relate with me or not as they individually desire. Because the gods are not well served by generic, dispassionate recognition or by rote performance of rituals and obligations, although such recognition is a part of the duty of a pagan religious person as an expression of general piety which pleases the gods, it's specific gods impose specific demands on the people that they are involved with. Um, A passionate life, one that involves the gods, is so much more satisfying for human beings, and passionate devotion to the paths of our matrons and patrons will develop us as human beings and as pagans. Ginette Paris and James Hillman's books are powerful descriptions of living in the service of as embodiments of our gods, although from a Jungian, not Wiccan perspective. I'll definitely recommend Ginette Paris's books, Pagan Meditations and Pagan Grace, and James Hillman's A Terrible Love of War for a reading in eloquent polytheistic theology. Wicca's polytheistic, which we interpret in a variety of different ways. I'm going to begin by saying that my theology is fundamentally pragmatic. I'm interested in what works rather than in some absolute truth that may not exist, that's not testable when I might believe that I'm right next to it, and that has no immediate practical utility. It's not that I don't believe in things like love and truth and beauty, among other things, but that they are revealed in practice as we experience them and as we work to realize them, not in the grand abstractions. In the same way, the gods are enacted, and they are made real through experiences with other people, the forces of nature, and social reality. The most common theological position in the Wiccan movement is probably duotheistic, that is, this notion that there exists a great feminine energy and a great masculine energy, and that all goddesses are part of the great feminine and all gods are aspects of the great masculine. For a variety of reasons, I disagree with this position. The historical facts appear to be that in polytheistic religions, different goddesses and gods are seen as different individuals with whom one can have relationships, and that their gender is simply one aspect that they might share with one another, as they share an interest in blacksmithing or warfare or basket weaving. Now, my version of Wiccan theology, which I'll be speaking through throughout this series of lectures, is panentheistic and polytheistic. The gods are present and partly embodied in every aspect of the material world. Numerous individual beings with different sets of specific powers and interests. Human beings also differ, and we have different interests that predispose both humans and deities to form relationships with one another, which are based on these affinities. Well, it's possible to initially talk about the generic energy of the divine female or divine male. In general, that kind of identification is only useful in the earliest stage of theological development, and is replaced by the invocation or evocation of specific deities as you progress along the Wiccan path. Although all gods of both sexes and a range of genders could potentially be one's matron or patron, we usually begin with the most generic and the least personal, the female principle and the male principle, and the sex that corresponds to the physical sex of the person connecting with the deity. The gods have their own opinions, and often a specific goddess or god will come to a person and claim them as their servant. This is a highly prized development, and it's one of the goals of the earlier stages of coven training, to acquire a matron and eventually also a patron deity to oversee and participate in the Wiccan's training. In a polytheistic religion, people have relationships of respect and worship with a number of deities, while being really close and tight with only a couple of them, with friendly but more distant relationships with the others. Now, there's generally three ways that matron and patron relationships are formed, and by the way, these relationships are not always exclusive, although they frequently are, and people may have these relationships with different deities as they change and grow. Typically, I expect people to be adopted by different deities as they proceed up the different levels of initiation. The first way, the god chooses. For whatever reason, or for no reason that anyone can tell, a goddess or god will tap someone on the shoulder and say, "You're mine." Sometimes it's as clear as that, but more often the realization of her or his interest grows as we find images of black cats and actual black cats coming to be more common in our lives, or in odd coincidental moments, or a particular word or a name of a deity will keep appearing in our reading material, or dreams will prompt us to investigate until we realize that Bast wants to have us as her servant, for example. Second, a person comes to a clearer understanding of who they fundamentally are, and they see that a particular goddess or god represents the best and strongest expression of that type of a person. An animal lover who strikes up a relationship with Pan as the shepherd and piper at the gates of dawn, a protector of the animals, or a hunter who connects with Heron the hunter and the hunted, a homebody who connects with Hestia, and so on. Or, the third, the goddess or god represents or embodies something that you desire to be, and she or he will help you to become stronger in that area of life. For example, a person who wanted to be more eloquent would work with Mercury. A person who wanted to be more graceful and attractive would connect with Freda Erzuli. Someone who wanted to hone their skills would get together with Lou or Bridget. In all cases, however, this is not something for nothing. The gods demand that a person do the work and serve them wholeheartedly in their areas of interest in return for their help. Making agreements with the gods obliges one to uphold your end of the agreement, and so be careful that what you agree to and be careful that you know to whom you are talking. A war goddess, like the Morrigan, is not a kindly mother, and she doesn't like being treated like one. The god Dionysus does not like people who are inclined to temperate behavior, but demands passionate excess, and so on. It's rather like having a powerful friend who takes one on as a protege. In other words, devoting yourself to the god does not automatically guarantee you their wholehearted support. That has to be earned. But the devotion gets their attention. And you have the option of refusing to be involved with a particular goddess or god, although then you will be frustrated in the areas that they rule over. We participate in the divine, we co-create the gods, or at least we express them through our lives, not separate from, but swept into the divine purposes. Rites of exchange and communion. These are rituals done to celebrate and affirm the relationship that an individual or a group has with their matron and patron deities. So they are rites of praise and celebration, which may include an element of prayer, offerings, or supplication as well. They often include a restatement of the agreements which the gods made with the people in the ritual, and of the commitments that the people have made. They might include apologies from the people for not upholding their side of the bargain, or appeals to the gods to do their part. They emphasize the admirable qualities of the deities and tell stories of their great exploits and features and lavishly praise them. A new Wiccan begins with a desire to find and connect with the matron and patron, or with a sense that someone is trying to get their attention. Well, to begin with, start by doing some research. Who is this goddess or god, and why are they interested in hanging around with you? Or why are you interested in getting their attention? And how do they like to be worshipped? It's gloriously inappropriate and insulting to assume that you know everything that you need to know by listening to your gut, or by some syncretic all goddesses are one balderdash. Gods and goddesses of war are not the great loving mother, to take a glaringly obvious example. Calling the Morrigan as the great mother upsets her. Calling Kali as though she were cuddly and all-nourishing results in her cutting your head off. Calling Ares as the calm and benevolent god of peace is just plain ignorant. Because the gods are not well served by generic, dispassionate recognition or by rote performance of rituals and obligations, although, of course, such recognition is part of a duty of a pagan person, this expression of general piety pleases the gods. Specific gods impose specific demands. A passionate life is so much more satisfying, and passionate devotion to the paths of our matrons and patrons develop us. Ginette Paris and James Hillman's books. So know to whom you are speaking, and talk with them appropriately. Although your grasp of Koine Greek may be lousy, as mine is, there are good translations of rituals and invocations to the Greek gods as examples, and modeling a ritual of praise to one of them on a Greek original brings power into the connection and honors them appropriately. There's no need to grovel, but an attitude of respect is good. So the standard Wiccan ritual format, our generic ritual: clear the space, ground the participants, cast the circle, call the guardians of the directions with particular emphasis on the aspects of the gods whom you are celebrating and honoring in that ritual. Invite the celebrants to come in, ask for the gods to be present and praise them, and call in whatever amount of detail you want. Undertake an offering of thanks, but also a sacrifice of food and drink. Bless the participants, share in a feast, and close down by dismissing the directions and thanking the gods, then grounding and ending the circle. This standard ritual format can be adapted to any number of to honor any number of different goddesses and gods and the seasonal celebrations and so on. The most appropriate deities to honor, of course, are your matron and patron, and if there's a prayer that's recently been answered, the goddess or god to whom you prayed. You might also choose to honor a goddess or god that you admire but don't have a strong relationship with, in the hopes of building a stronger connection. Don't worry about embarrassing them by praising them too much. You can and you should pour your heart out in adoration. The ritual can be as elaborate or as simple as suits you, as long as your purpose is clear, you are honest in your praise and dedication, and you follow through on any commitments made in circle. Calling upon your ancestors is important in family rituals. They're already well disposed towards you and interested in being involved in your lives. Calling upon the gods of the threshold, the gods of the household, the lares, the Roman spirits of the family line, and penates, the guardians of the household in general, and of the hearth fire, such as Vesta or Hestia, are appropriate in family rituals as well. A good date for these sorts of rituals are either the feast day of a given goddess or god, a prominent ancestor's birth or death date, Samhain, or the birthday of your family's founder or its wedding anniversary, depending on whom you are calling. Tuesday is sacred to the gods of war, Wednesday, the goddesses of communication, Friday, the goddesses of beauty and sex, for examples. A simple and effective family ritual would be a joint offering at the ancestor altar by the elders, followed by a meal together, perhaps including an offering and praise song to the gods of your household. A modified version of the Jewish Seder or a Thanksgiving dinner ritual fits this purpose very well. A birthday ritual can be included, particularly if there are young children, having them sing Happy Birthday to Athena, for example. If you wish to perform a formal rite in honor of the gods, it should hew fairly closely to the forms and style of the original without necessarily copying it. Excuse me. It is inappropriate for a non-Hellene to perform an exact copy of a rite to Artemis, but it honors her to infuse a Wiccan rite with that spirit and phrasing, and, as a suggestion, quoting directly with attribution, from the Homeric hymn to Artemis or the Orphic hymn to Artemis. Both are ancient and culturally appropriate. Other sources can be used depending on the deities to be honored. And frank, true, and enthusiastic celebration of the beauty, power, wisdom, and attributes of the gods being honored, even beyond the rather stuffy Protestant Northern European norms of expression, would be appropriate. Excuse me. And now I'm going to talk specifically about feminist ritual. Now, most of you will have a vague familiarity with Victor Turner's description of initiation rites after Van Gennep, but you may not have considered the implicit gendering of those rites. Quote, while men's initiations involve isolation, liminality, and reintegration, women undergo a three-step process of enclosure, transformation, and emergence, from Brandy Williams' lovely book, The Woman Magician. Although both women and men are involved in Wicca, the integration of women's experience into our symbolism and ritual is less than complete, let us say. Having a majority of women leaders does not automatically translate into a fully aware and feminist practice. Talking about war and sex. War and gender make a knot, one that doesn't appear to be based on biology, but on developments in human culture. War has always been necessary, but it doesn't come naturally to anyone, female or male. So in many cultures, men are socialized to be able to kill and women are not. In one of the pagan cultures ancestral to Wicca, Norse paganism, many women were warriors, as a recent re-evaluation of grave goods buried with female bodies indicates. And in numerous pagan cultures, there are goddesses of war as well as gods of war. Athena, who was born in full armor in Greece, Inanna, the guardian of her city in Sumer, Kali Durga in India, the demon slayer and the incarnation of rage, and others. So the lenses through which we view gender are shaping what we find, not nature again, but culture. We may also look at the transgender and intersex persons as examples of biological and gender ambiguities and assert that both sex and gender fall on a continuum, with female at one end, male at one end, and a number of individuals somewhere in the middle, and very few of us altogether on one extreme of the continua on all the variables that we might apply. When we don't challenge gender in religion, the standard default is to maleness, which is simply wrong. In cultures organized around men's interests, women relate to men or to each other through men. To call the divine male or female or neither does not name it, but it's a metaphor which reflects on an inhuman force, a metaphor excuse me, which shapes our relationships with it. Quote, because women and men have different roles in Western culture, our path to wholeness differs. For men, the path to wholeness is well defined. Bring out the feminine within by developing personal intuition, acknowledging the divinity within real women, and worshiping embodied female deity. Also from Brandy Williams. What happens when we take the stance that a woman magician's path to magical wholeness is to reintegrate the male within? Because of that still unequal balance of power in the world, just flipping the gender of the practitioner doesn't really work. Again, from Williams. Much feminist-inspired ritual practice assumes that all unequal power distribution is an issue. So these rituals are run as much as possible by consensus, with a person or persons as ritual leader on a pro tempore or ad hoc basis, with the various pieces of ritual business shared out amongst the participants, and a strong focus on female symbolism and imagery. Most goddess-centered groups are open only to women and girl children and basically ignore relationships with men or with the masculine aspects of the sacred. They're often second-wave feminist groups affirming the female. They affirm principally the positive female in the maiden, mother, crone series of symbols, celebrating the typical life cycle of women from young girl through adolescence, sexual awakening and maturity, motherhood, to the wisdom of old age and teaching. Excuse me, these Dianic groups, with the largest stream of them being inspired by the writing and organizing efforts of Zed Budapest, are a decreasing minority in the Wiccan spectrum, but highly influential in bringing forth consciousness of the divine feminine as a force in its own right. The larger goddess spirituality movement, which merges into the New Age fringe, its most prominent theologians being, I would say, Carol Christ and Carolyn Merchant, is also influential, but it's less closely tied to the Wiccan religion. The Reclaiming movement is the largest strongly feminist community in the Wiccan stream of things. Although Reclaiming came out of American folk magic traditions with a dose of voodoo and Hawaiian huna, it has moved towards Wiccan symbolism and, through the writings of Starhawk, Matcha Nightmare, and others, has had a great influence into the Wiccan and broader neo-pagan communities. Reclaiming is strongly pro-women without being anti-male, strongly values sexual variety and free expression, emphasizes music, chant, and movement in its rituals, has a strong focus on trance and ecstatic experiences, and very highly emphasizes acting in the world in accordance with our beliefs. These have all been strong influences into Wicca, although their emphasis on political activism rather less so. Feminist Wicca also emphasizes the idea of Wicca as a nature religion, descended from the religions of rural areas, although the idea that witchcraft is genuinely an ancient pagan practice of the ordinary people is largely a romantic reconstruction. And so there's substantial overlap with ecologically inspired forms of feminism, particularly in the work of Starhawk. Goddesses and gods, femininities and masculinities. In a polytheology, there are a large number of goddesses and gods who each have different interests and personalities, and who choose to relate to human beings in their own particular ways. Generalities are not always that useful. One relates with these deities that are most like the type of person that one is, or who are interested in the kind of things that you're interested in major areas of life. But it's not one size fits all, and it's not even one goddess of smithcraft for all smiths and workers. As our discussion of intersectionality later on will make clear, our connections with the divine are individual and reflect our individual needs and their interests in a more complex way. A starting place is that there are a great number of divine beings that are female and male, gay, bi, and straight, in the form of animals and plants and features of the natural world as well as human, who revealed themselves to us through dreams and visions, stories, and through science, logic, government, and daily life. These beings can be contacted and worked with through the symbolism that represent them, the processes that they are embodied in, and the stories that we tell about them. Wicca does not have a set of scriptures or a creedal statement. We're centered in myth, ritual, and story, and so our search for truth and meaning is refracted through numerous encounters with divinity in the world and through involvement with potentially dozens of goddesses and gods. I'll just select a couple now and talk about them a bit. Athena, the Greek guardian of the city of Athens, who sprang fully armored from her father Zeus's head. She is the goddess of wisdom and intelligence, of law and government, but also of war. She is a virgin with no interest whatever in sex, who identifies strongly with male power and masculinity. If you're a person interested in government or in scholarship, then you might want to connect up with and serve Athena. Thor is the Norse god of thunder, principally known as the protector of the common people. He is very strong, impulsive, not very bright, and fond of a drink. He likes to take on human form and wander around the community, helping out. If you see yourself as very protective of your family and community, like a good police officer, then Thor would like you. Freda Erzuli is the voodoo goddess of feminine beauty and allure, of luxury and wealth, but also of ostentation and conspicuous consumption. She loves to be flattered, and she's charming and seductive. She's pleased to help you out with your love life, and will work with anyone, female or male, who wants to be charming and beautiful. By establishing a relationship with a deity, you do not automatically get whatever their particular strength is, but you get a powerful mentor who is embodied in the things that you are interested in. By exercising leadership in service of Zeus or Odin, you become a better leader. By speaking eloquently in tune with Hermes and Mercury, you become more eloquent, and so on. And because of the great variety of personal styles which gods have, one cannot say that this or that style is ordained or sacred, while another style is unnatural or evil. This means, unfortunately, that appealing to our gods for ethical considerations is pointless. Ethics are issues for human beings, not gods. There is no action, no matter how horrific, that one god or another has not done and enthusiastically approves of. On the positive side, this means that there are many different ways to be a good and ethical person, in tune with the good as we understand it, and many ways to partner with particular deities to do so. A femme person in a male body can be a good and kind person and be loved by the gods. A butch person in a female body, likewise, a strong and inarticulate person, a person with physical limitations or mental illnesses. Polytheism extends beyond the gods to the individual persons. A devotee of Aphrodite is not the same as a devotee of Shango, and neither resembles a child of Christ, but all can be good and ethical human beings, in tune with their natures and as supported by their gods. Okay, that's it for today.